Hello, you're watching A News. I'm Lee Brown. Here are your top stories. Trump tells Israel to stop bombing Gaza as Hamas agrees to release all hostages. The Czech Republic heads to the polls for a second day in its crucial parliamentary election. And Armenia says it has agreed with Azerbaijan to reopen transport links as part of ongoing peace efforts. Good afternoon. Donald Trump has called on Israel to stop bombing Gaza after Hamas signaled it would accept key parts of his 20-point peace plan. The group says it is ready to enter negotiations immediately for the release of all hostages after months of failed attempts to end the war. Let's take a look.
Hours after US President Donald Trump told Israel to stop its bombing campaign, several explosions lit up the sky over Gaza. This, despite Hamas agreeing to immediately begin negotiations to release Israeli hostages, in a sign that it has accepted some terms of the US plan to end the Gaza war. However, the group has not yet agreed to key issues such as disarmament or a staged withdrawal from Gaza, saying it wants further negotiations. Trump had given Hamas until Sunday to accept or reject his 20-point proposal.
This is a big day. We'll see how it all turns out. We have to get the final word down in concrete. Very importantly, I look forward to having the hostages come home to their parents and having some of the hostages, unfortunately, you know the condition they're in, come home likewise to their parents because their parents wanted them just as much as though that young man or young woman were alive.
On Saturday, Israel said it was preparing to implement the first phase of Trump's plan to release the hostages. Meanwhile, Palestinians in central Gaza expressed hope that the war could soon come to an end.
It's happy news. It saves those who are still alive. It saves the people, and thank God that they agreed. This is enough, good people. We are tired. I swear to God, we are tired. It's enough what we have lost. Houses have been damaged. Everything has been damaged. What is left? Nothing. We are living in a desert, but thank God after all.
We are happy that the war will stop because we are tired of hunger, displacement and bloodshed. We are tired of hearing bad news. We want to hear happy news, to regain the feeling of safety and, God willing, to return to our homes.
Qatar, where part of the Hamas leadership is based, Egypt, which borders Gaza, and the United Nations have also welcomed Hamas's response to the peace deal.
Well, pressure is growing on Israel as it faces more international condemnation and global protests after its military intercepted 40 boats in a flotilla carrying aid to Gaza. Officials say it's detained more than 450 foreign activists and that deportations have begun to send them back to their respective countries.
There were clashes in Sweden between pro-Palestinian demonstrators and police as hundreds protested on Thursday against Israel's decision to intercept and detain activists on a Gaza-bound flotilla carrying aid and medicine. The tensions led to numerous arrests. Demonstrations have erupted worldwide as thousands took their anger to the streets. It turned violent in Spain, where supporters of Palestinians and police came face to face in the capital, Madrid, when officers tried to disperse the crowds. Tensions also escalated in Barcelona, where international food chains were vandalized.
I'm hurt. I feel incredibly helpless. I feel anger and sick when I listen to people speaking on the TV or see Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at a summit saying that children in Palestine eat over 2,000 calories per day. How can they allow that man inside to say those things? The anger in our society has accumulated is here today.
In Italy, emotions also ran high as police used tear gas. Protesters in Brasilia demanded the release of detained Brazilian activists who were on board one of the boats in the flotilla.
Regarding the detained Brazilians, the Foreign Ministry has taken a firm stance. But this is more than diplomacy. It's about genocide. I don't think diplomacy is enough anymore. We need a firmer measure, like breaking off relations. That's what we're asking for.
In Paris, demonstrators gathered in front of the Israeli embassy to show support for Gaza.
I came to demonstrate in front of the Israeli embassy to show our support for the people of Gaza and to demonstrate that the French people denounce the genocide currently being committed in Gaza by the Israeli army.
Governments also responded to Israel's actions. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has urged Israel to immediately repatriate the detained Mexican nationals. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa urged Israel to immediately release South Africans who were also on the flotilla, including former President Nelson Mandela's grandson, Nkosi Zwelivelile Mandela. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan criticized Israeli aggression, saying it showed Israel's government has no intention of letting hopes for peace grow. Israeli officials have repeatedly denounced the flotilla mission as a stunt. Israel says it's defending itself against charges of genocide in the International Court of Justice.
Joining me now to discuss the latest on the Gaza peace plan is Nuno Wanon Martins, political analyst calling from Lisbon, Portugal. Nuno, I want to start by asking, has Hamas said it will immediately begin negotiations on releasing hostages, but has stopped short of accepting disarmament or withdrawal. How significant is this partial acceptance, and are we surprised by this?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me. No, I'm not surprised by this. I think we are facing exactly what it should be, which is the real politic about accepting a peace plan. And I think Hamas is playing well in the sense that they need to release the hostages as the first step. And if they don't do it, then the plan cannot move on one hand. And on the other hand, they know that if they don't do it, Israel has basically the opportunity to try to eliminate Hamas, which was some political goal of the Israeli government regarding after the 7th of October 2023.
And given the global scale of the pro-Palestinian protests and the symbolism of the flotilla being intercepted, do you think this movement could influence Israeli government decisions at all, or is Israel in general immune to this kind of external pressure?
Let me start by the second question. Israel is not immune for external pressure. The question is, the flotilla cannot be seen as external pressure because the flotilla is basically a type of far-left response to political pressure in order to give the idea that you have a worldwide view talking about Israel and criticizing Israel. And in my view, this is nothing more than propaganda. Meaning, we have seen this in the past in different situations. And I think that the responsibility about what is going on is the lack of response by European Western countries to this type of attitudes. I wouldn't say that these flotilla and these demonstrations, as you shown on the piece here on the television, are basically the majority of the people think. However, this gives the idea that the society is going into that direction on one hand. On the other hand, general people seeing this can also go into that specific direction. First, saying that, creating the idea that there is a genocide in the Gaza war on one hand. On the other hand, checking that something is bad, so we have to criticize and we have to push for the Israeli government to stop what is going on. This is not what the flotilla is doing. The flotilla said that they were sending humanitarian aid to Gaza. That humanitarian aid was proved to be inexistent on one hand. Secondly, this is the type of pressure more to the Western societies rather than to the Israeli government, in my view.
Well, I'll take your point on board there. If this deal progresses, however, the 20-point peace plan for Gaza, How close would Israel be to eliminating Hamas?
That's a very interesting question because exactly the peace plan allows Hamas to continue not as a group because their members have to go either into a political way and a peaceful way and to recognize Israel. They cannot continue as it is today on one hand. On the other hand, to eliminate Hamas means that the peace plan, as I see it, will not fulfill. So I do believe that we have to go step by step. The first step is the release of hostages. Hamas have accepted it. And now let's see how long it will take Hamas to deliver these hostages, first and foremost, and the bodies of those who are already dead. And if this goes, then we go to the second point of the process, which also will take a certain time. If it doesn't go, then Israel will try to eliminate Hamas. The question is exactly the same. This is a war of already 2 years, almost 2 years, because the war didn't start on the 7th of October, it started later, on one hand. On the other hand, it's very difficult for Israel to eliminate Hamas in Gaza because of the situation of the urban war that we are facing on one hand, and also because of the tunnels. How long it will take, if it will take, this is a question mark, in my view.
I just want to pull your attention to the international community. So we've seen Qatar, Egypt, and the UN have all welcomed Hamas's response. But does it go far enough to end this war? How significant is it that they've welcomed this response? Could that pressure Israel into accelerating the peace negotiations as well?
I think, to be honest with you, I think that, again, as I said before, it's a question of the timing. Hamas have accepted it. How long it will take Hamas to deliver the first point, which is, again, releasing the hostages and to give the bodies. This will be basically the point that we are discussing here. It is very welcoming that everybody has accepted and has welcomed the Hamas position, but between this position and the first step, it will give, first and foremost, to understand if we are going really into putting forward the peace plan or not.
And now I just want to draw your attention to a certain point. If negotiations over hostages succeed but disarmament fails, could we end up in a frozen conflict?
I don't think so. I think that you have two options. The first option will be the status quo between 2007 and 2023 between Hamas and Gaza and Israel. I don't think the Israeli society and the Israeli government will accept that, on one hand. The second possibility is maybe to give by the Israeli forces to an international force to be putting in Gaza. And this international force either will try to eliminate Hamas, which I think it's very difficult to happen, but it's not going to live with Hamas for sure. So I do believe that the war will continue somehow until there will be, taking in consideration that the peace plan is not going to move forward. The war will continue until Israel will find itself in a situation where they believe that it really eliminated Hamas on one hand. On the other hand, it will also depend on the next Israeli government and what they want to do as well. But I do believe there is a certain idea in the Israeli society that Hamas has to disappear in order to have peace in the region.
I just want to finish. Israel says it's preparing to implement the first stage of Trump's plan. We know that. How much leverage does Washington actually have over Netanyahu at this point?
I think it has a huge leverage on one hand because the international society has demonstrated somehow certain criticism of Israel, which created a certain isolationism of the Israeli government on one hand. There is also some shift in the American society, especially with the young people, which makes a certain pressure between Israel and its relationship with the Americans. So this is the leverage that Trump has, in my view, at this moment. And I also believe that for the internal consumption for the Prime Minister of Israel, even if he has a criticism of let's say, the far-right elements of his government, he knows that he can count with the more centrist members because they approve this plan, they support this plan, And I do believe that it's in the interest of the Prime Minister to move forward with this plan, because Israel cannot be totally isolated in the international arena at this stage.
Well, Nuno, thank you very much indeed for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Now, the US military says it's carried out another strike on a vessel allegedly carrying drugs off the coast of Venezuela, killing 4 people. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted a video online of the strike and said the operation was ordered by President Trump. He described those on board as narco-terrorists and said the vessel was transporting large quantities of narcotics bound for the US. It's the 4th such strike in recent weeks, part of what the administration calls an armed conflict with cartels. But critics warn the policy risks killing people without due process. Munich Airport has reopened after fresh disruption on Friday evening, as both of its runways were closed for a second time in less than 24 hours due to suspected drone activity. German air traffic control says flight operations were suspended as a precaution. Police helicopters were deployed and passengers on some departing flights were told of the closure. German authorities said new laws may be introduced to allow drones to be shot down, while speculation continues over possible Russian involvement, something Moscow denies. Now, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron met in Saarbrücken to discuss the growing challenges facing Europe as they marked 35 years of German reunification. The leaders highlighted threats from rising autocracies, external pressures on democracy, and economic challenges reshaping the global order. Merz stressed the responsibility of Germany and its citizens to address these internal and external threats, while Macron emphasized Europe's need to protect key industries and strengthen its strategic resilience. The gathering brought together top German and French officials, signaling unity and cooperation in defending democracy and ensuring Europe's economic and social stability.
The global economic order is currently being rewritten. Tariff barriers are being re-erected. Selfishness is becoming more visible again. And perhaps that is why we have become economically weaker. And that is also why the social promises we have made to each other are so much harder to fulfill today than they used to be. In addition, years of irregular, uncontrolled migration to Germany have polarized our country and opened up new divisions in society. This is a huge responsibility, and we are well aware of the scale of the task. But this scale of the task must also be understood and accepted by everyone, by all the citizens of our country. The global economic order is currently being rewritten. Tariff barriers are being re-erected. Selfishness is becoming more visible again. And perhaps that is why we have become economically weaker. And that is also why the social promises we have made to each other are so much harder to fulfill today than they used to be. In addition, years of irregular, uncontrolled migration to Germany have polarized our country and opened up new divisions in society. This is a huge responsibility, and we are well aware of the scale of the task. But this scale of the task must also be understood and accepted by everyone, by all the citizens of our country.
Now, a Finnish court ruled it doesn't have jurisdiction to prosecute the captain and 2 senior officers accused of breaking 5 undersea power and internet cables in the Baltic Sea last year. The suspects were charged with dragging the anchor for about 90 kilometers along the seabed on the 25th of December. The 3 crew members denied the charges. Finland says the ship is believed to be part of Russia's shadow fleet of tankers. Helsinki District Court said it was not possible to apply Finnish criminal law to the case. Now, Ukraine may have to wait longer for US long-range missiles as Washington continues to struggle with a government shutdown. Sources say the US Tomahawk missile shipments to Ukraine could be unlikely.
As the war grinds on in Eastern Europe, Ukraine is still waiting for long-range missiles. But that wait could be extended as Kyiv's biggest arms supplier, the United States, faces its own political deadlock. Discussions about US military support for Kyiv were frozen after the government shutdown on Wednesday. The Trump administration's plan to send Tomahawk missiles to Kiev now hangs in the balance. According to a US official and 3 sources, current inventories are already committed to the Navy and other operational needs. The official said the US may look into allowing European allies to buy other long-range weapons and supply them to Ukraine, but Tomahawks were unlikely. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also expressed uncertainty about the delivery. Washington had previously signed a $500 million aid package for Kiev last month, the first since Donald Trump returned to office, using funds from NATO countries. The move comes after the Kremlin said on Thursday that if the US provides Tomahawks to Ukraine, it would trigger a new round of dangerous escalation between Russia and the West.
Today is day 2 of voting in the Czech Republic in an election that could reshape the nation's political path. The vote pits Prime Minister Petr Fiala's centre-right coalition against populist former Premier Andrej Babiš, whose ANO party is leading most opinion polls. Let's take a look.
Voters in the Czech Republic headed to the polls on Friday for the first day of a 2-day election that could reshape the country's political course. The contest pits Prime Minister Petr Fiala's centre-right coalition against populist former Premier Andrej Babiš, whose ANO party tops most opinion surveys. I just wanted to ask our voters not to feel that we've won. We can easily lose as well. So I asked them all to come to the polls and support us, because it's very important. Babiš, campaigning in his Moravian Silesian stronghold, presented himself as the voice of ordinary Czechs struggling with high costs of living, promising higher wages, lower taxes, and reduced aid for Kiev. He argued that the government is prioritizing foreign commitments over domestic needs. Critics say his platform mirrors Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban's, signaling a shift towards a more populist, Eurosceptic stance if ANO returns to power. Fiala called the ballot decisive for the nation's future, urging citizens to keep the country firmly aligned with NATO and the European Union. Casting his vote in Brno, he stressed the importance of maintaining liberal democracy, backing Ukraine, and preserving credibility with Brussels.
And I believe that every citizen will use their vote and go to vote because where the Czech Republic will head is fundamental and important, and it's not just about security. That is, of course, the primary task of these days, but it's also about prosperity, because if we shift eastward, our country will also become poorer.
President Petr Pavel, who voted in Prague, warned that even after ballots are counted, forming a stable government will be difficult.
Building bridges across those trenches that have been dug isn't going to be entirely easy. Similarly, it won't be easy to form a majority in the lower house, so I think the negotiations probably won't be entirely easy.
Polls suggest Andrej Babiš's ANO party could take more than 30% of the vote, around 10 points ahead of Prime Minister Petr Fiala's Spolu coalition. But even with a small ally, ANO looks set to fall short of a majority in Parliament's 200-seat lower house. That could leave Babiš reliant on fringe parties opposed to the EU and NATO if he wants to form his preferred one-party cabinet. For Spolu, the only path to survival would be if several small groups failed to pass the 5% threshold, a scenario that worked in their favour in the last election, but according to pollsters, is unlikely to repeat this time. As voting continues until Saturday, the result will decide not only who governs in Prague, but also whether the Czech Republic stays the course with Brussels or joins the ranks of Europe's populist challengers.
In October 1993, Russia faced its worst political crisis since the Soviet collapse. President Boris Yeltsin dissolved parliament after months of deadlock, prompting lawmakers to barricade themselves in the White House in Moscow. The standoff escalated into armed clashes with tanks and troops surrounding the building. By the early hours of the 4th of October, government forces stormed the White House, resulting in more than 150 deaths and hundreds of injuries. The crisis ended with Yeltsin consolidating power and the adoption of a new constitution, strengthening the presidency and reshaping Russia's political system. Today marks the anniversary of WikiLeaks, the controversial site that leaked classified documents and ignited debates all over the world. WikiLeaks was founded in 2006 by Australian activist Julian Assange, who has since returned to Australia last year after his release from a high-security British prison. From US military files to climate science emails, it rose to global attention, sparking debates over transparency, digital privacy, and press freedom that continue today. Sean Diddy Combs has been sentenced to more than 4 years in prison. The hip-hop mogul was convicted of 2 prostitution-related offences, but was cleared of more serious charges of sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. Combs spoke in court for the first time since his high-profile trial earlier this year and admitted his past behaviour was disgusting, shameful and sick, and apologised personally to his former girlfriends who testified against him during the trial. Georgians are heading to the polls this weekend to vote for mayors and municipal councils, but the election is already mired in controversy. 8 opposition parties are boycotting, accusing the ruling Georgian Dream of undermining democracy and pushing the country closer to Russia. The ruling Georgian Dream party has framed the election as a choice between independence and what it calls foreign interference. The election follows months of protests and stalled EU talks, and pro-EU groups are taking to the streets, calling the day a peaceful revolution. Now, Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed to mutually unblock transport links. Armenian Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan says both countries will gain access to each other's transport systems, including railways, roads, and other infrastructure. He noted that the shortest link between mainland Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan will serve as a transit route, while Armenia could use Nakhchivan's territory to connect its north and south by a railway. Let's take a look at this in more detail.
After years of closed borders, Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed to reopen all transport routes between them. Until now, their shared rail lines and highways, including the only land corridor to Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan territory, have been shut since the early 1990s Karabakh War. In effect, nearly 3 decades of conflict meant closed borders and decades-old blockades that choked regional trade. The war of 2020 between Azerbaijan and Armenia, in addition to leading to the former's victory, gave rise to debate surrounding the opening of communications with the Zangezur corridor and proposed overland passage connecting mainland Azerbaijan and its landlocked Nakhchivan territory via Armenia at the heart of it. After almost 4 years of deadlock, on the 8th of August 2025, parties agreed on the Trump route for international peace and prosperity in Washington. And now in October, Armenia's Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan confirmed at a security forum that both countries will now gain access to each other's infrastructure, railways, highways and transit hubs. For Azerbaijan, this corridor reconnects Nakhchivan directly to the rest of the country. For Armenia, it opens a rare chance to link its north and south by rail via Nakhchivan's territory, a connection it has never had before. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan says the agreement is inevitable and sees it as a path to greater regional stability. He also highlights the economic stakes, especially for Armenia's mining sector, which could export more easily once transit is restored. The reopening of these routes is expected to improve trade, travel, and regional connections after decades of closure.
Now, Turkey says it has no intention of giving up Russian gas against the backdrop of growing resistance to Russian energy. Turkish Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar says the country plans to increase gas imports from Russia, Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan. The minister pointed to existing gas supply agreements with Russia ahead of the winter season. He said access to these resources must be ensured without compromising energy security. Now, Iran is deepening ties with Russia, China and Turkey as it braces for the return of UN nuclear sanctions. Our correspondent in Tehran, Turaj Shilalilu, has more.
The Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty between Iran and Russia began on Thursday. It lays down enhanced cooperation between Tehran and Moscow in bilateral fields, as well as within regional and international groups such as BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Iran's foreign ministry said that the two countries will spare no effort to safeguard multilateralism and respect for international law. The treaty consists of 47 articles to work together in technology, information and cybersecurity, peaceful nuclear energy collaboration, and counter-terrorism efforts. It will also focus on regional cooperation, environmental issues, and combating money laundering and organized crime. The treaty will be valid for 20 years after it was concluded in January this year in Moscow by President Masoud Pezeshkian and President Vladimir Putin. As well as strengthening relations with Moscow, Tehran has also signed a comprehensive document on cooperation with Beijing, valid for 25 years. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that China is Iran's comprehensive strategic partner. He also said that regardless of any changes in the international situation, Tehran will continue to deepen its relations with China. And Tehran and Ankara have also discussed bilateral defense ties and regional developments after the Iranian Defense Minister, Brigadier General Aziz Nasirzadeh, visited neighboring Turkey this week. General Nasirzadeh told IRNA that both sides exchanged views on border security, developments in Syria, and Israel threats against the regional countries. He added that both countries' viewpoints were close. This all comes just as the United Nations nuclear sanctions on Iran were reinstated last week. It's despite a joint Russia-China draft resolution at the Security Council proposing a 6-month delay in sanctions. Turaj Shilalilu, Tehran, A News TV.
Thank you for joining me. That's your news update for now. Make sure you stay tuned to A News for more updates.